Welcome to the Scott and Brandon Show, a show where we entertain the pressing biblical, social, and political issues of today. My name is Scott Jackson, and this is my co-host, Brandon Ulmer. Our aim is to have open conversations about serious topics and to build up the body of Christ in the process. If you're interested in theology, applying scriptural principles to our daily lives, or political and social issues as they relate to Christianity, you'll definitely want to tune in. This is the Scott and Brandon Show. All right, everybody, welcome to the Scott and Brandon Show. My name is Scott Jackson, and I'm joined, as always, by my usual co-host, Brandon Ulmer. But today we have another guest with us. We have Brett Salyer with us. He is actually one of my cousins. He is my resident cryptocurrency expert that I turn to for all of my cryptocurrency questions.
World's foremost expert in cryptocurrency.
Yeah, he is the highest ranking expert that's ever appeared on the show. So it'll be a fun episode today. We're excited to get into cryptocurrency, maybe some of the frequently asked questions regarding this topic. This topic is sort of exploding on the mainstream scene, as it were, just due to everything that the Trump administration has done regarding cryptocurrency. It's caused people to have at least a higher awareness of it. I feel like before it was more so a fringe topic for the extremely smart IT people out there. But now it seems to be something that your average Joes, such as Brandon and myself, are at least becoming interested in. And with the rise of apps like Coinbase and things like that, and now you can purchase cryptocurrency on PayPal. It's made accessing that investment, if that's what you want to call it, we'll get into that later, a little bit easier. So before we dive into all of that, Brandon, Brett, how are you guys doing today? You guys doing good?
Doing good.
Yeah.
Doing good.
Yeah, I can't complain, man. It has been absolutely gorgeous down here at the beach. So I'm not complaining. I'm enjoying it. Although the one thing I will say, my allergies are still messing with me, and now like my ear is clogged. You know how when you're driving up and you're going up a mountain and your ears pop and it like stays clogged? Like yes. That's how my ear is right now. It's so annoying. I've done everything I could think of to try to unclog it, but I don't know how. So other than that, though, I am good.
All right, cool,
yeah,
cool.
It's annoying.
Yeah, I think it got up to almost 80 degrees yesterday, at least here in Ohio. So that was nice.
Yeah,
nice.
It's going to be 81 here today, so I need to take the top off the Gladiator and drive around.
It's a casual flex.
Yeah.
Sure, better than the rain we've been having recently. It was raining for like probably 2 weeks straight at one point.
Yeah, all the rain we got was ridiculous. I had to mow my grass like 4 times.
I did not mow my grass once in that time frame.
My grass got so long, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, mine did too, but I refused to push my lawnmower through the mud.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
I live on a hill too, so it all sort of collects down in the ditch, and then
I hear you. Yeah.
Then you get stuck.
Yeah. I have a riding mower, which makes mowing in the wet grass a little bit more appealing. Doesn't matter to me so much, but it's still annoying because I have brown tire marks in my yard through part of it.
Yeah, that's what comes with it.
Oh, man. Alrighty. Well, we will go ahead and just dive on into the subject for today. Brandon, do you want to maybe kind of kick things off, give a brief summary as to what we're going to discuss today?
Yeah, so Brett, thank you for joining us. You'll be able to answer, I know, at least some of my questions, plus a lot of questions from those who do listen. Cryptocurrency, certainly, as Scott said, it is making headlines. It's in the mainstream media. But exactly what is crypto? Why should we be paying attention, and so forth. So it's I want you to, we'll go through and we'll talk about, exactly, crypto 101, what it is and what it's not, and so forth there. I did find it pretty interesting that even though as popular as crypto is at this point, based upon, comes from a study that was done on cryptocurrency. It's on security.org, but only 28% of America's population actually owns some form of cryptocurrency. So that's relatively low. It's roughly translate to 55 million people, it says. Now, obviously, it's estimated, so it's not an accurate number. So I thought that was interesting because it was still, from my perspective, relatively low. I mean, there's like over 300 some million people in the U.S. and only 55 million people, roughly estimated, actually own some form of cryptocurrency. But we'll see. That it's obviously subject to change now that some major things have occurred in the crypto market. So let's go ahead and dive on in. What exactly is cryptocurrency for our listeners out there?
Yeah. So actually, it's interesting. You mentioned, what did you say, 28% of the United States owns crypto?
Yeah.
From my perspective, that's actually a little bit higher than I expected. I hadn't
Wow.
actually looked at that stat in a while, but when you think about it, crypto is not super mainstream at the moment. There's not a lot of support for being able to use it for anything. There's not really like any way to spend it on things. Like if you go to Walmart or if you go to like the Home Depot or something nearby and you want to go and buy something with crypto, that's not really that easy. I mean, there are ways of doing it. For example, Coinbase offers a debit card that will debit your crypto account, and it'll basically just take the cash value of whatever crypto asset you have and then exchange it for US dollars and make that transaction happen somewhere in the back end. So there's things like that allow you to do that. But as far as like grabbing like a traditional like crypto hardware wallet and going to Walmart and saying, here's my private key, I'm going to sign this transaction and purchase these goods from Walmart, like that's not really something you can do.
And can I pause you there? Now, Tesla is doing that, right? Aren't they accepting Dogecoin?
Yeah, so Tesla is one of the fewer players that actually tend to support crypto transactions, and that's largely because Elon Musk is super heavy in the crypto game, primarily with Dogecoin. I think he also supported Bitcoin for a while. He may still, I'm not sure. But yeah, there are some platforms that do that, and like you said earlier, PayPal is into it, so they facilitate that a little bit better. It's weird because under the hood, a lot of times you're not even really using crypto. They kind of just like back the value of whatever it is that you hold with crypto, and then they're kind of just exchanging US dollars in the back end. Like I know for a lot of what we call centralized exchanges, like Coinbase and even Robinhood can be considered one, or Kraken. They don't always actually give you the asset itself. Like if you go and you buy like a bunch of Dogecoin, what's really happening is they're giving you the cash value of Dogecoin, and then they kind of hold it in the back end, and you don't actually have access to it. So if I wanted to, from like Coinbase, like say, hey, I want to send you some like, I don't know, Ethereum. What might actually just be happening is like I'm sending Ethereum from my, well, I guess I don't really own a wallet. With Coinbase and stuff, you don't actually own a wallet. They kind of just manage the assets for you, but they would basically just be swapping like who owns that cash value of that asset in the background. So I guess sort of go back to your original question, like cryptocurrency sort of is a store of value. It is a digital asset. It lives on the blockchain, and you can make transactions, i.e. move digital assets from one owner to another using something called a wallet. A lot of people who are using crypto today aren't actually exposed to the nitty-gritty details of cryptocurrency. That is, you don't have to worry about managing your wallet. You don't have to worry about keeping your seed phrase secret or anything like that.
As it was in the early 2000s with Bitcoin. I remember the wallet thing was a huge factor back then, and you wanted to keep your PIN or your passphrase, whatever, secret, because that was your wallet that held your crypto. And so now make sure there's a difference between, if I recall correctly, a difference between a cold wallet and a hot wallet.
Yep.
Right. And so the cold wallet, and correct me if I'm wrong, is basically Coinbase, where they hold your asset for you and so forth. And the hot wallet is where you actually have that passphrase, basically that key phrase that protects your crypto. You're holding your own crypto. Is that right?
It's actually kind of the other way around.
Other way. Okay, I knew.
So this is what you would call like a cold storage. This is a Ledger hardware wallet. It looks sort of like a USB thumb drive, but it doesn't actually have like a USB port on it. It's just a little, mine actually has Bluetooth, but it has Bluetooth and USB, and you sort of just, it's got a USB port on the side. I don't know if you can see that or not. But,
Yep.
You basically just plug that into your computer, and whenever you want to make a transaction, so you go to like, say you go to, like, usually Ledger will give you like an application that lives with this, and that application knows how to talk to the blockchain. And then you would put in, like, say if I wanted to send something to Scott, I would plug this thing in. I would start up Ledger Live, which is the name of the application they send with this, but you don't have to use Ledger Live. You can use other things. And there's like a little apps on here, one that supports each blockchain, and I would enter Scott's wallet address, and then I would it would prompt me on here to sign the transaction. And then once I do that, that transaction gets sent off to like a mempool, which is not really something I have to worry about, but it's something that the blockchain uses to sort of stage transactions. And then that transaction would get wrapped up into a block, and you would have things like miners or validation nodes that would pick up the transaction, package it into a block, try to solve the puzzle that I'm sure you've read about. And then once that's done, they get if we're talking Bitcoin, they get the Bitcoin reward, and then they ship it off to the blockchain where it gets added to the chain. Now, a hot wallet works similarly, except it's connected to the internet in some way, right? Like this thing right here is not connected to the internet in any way. That's why it's considered cold. There's no way for this thing to be hacked right now. Because it's not connected to the internet. A hot wallet would be something like
a phone which has an app on it, like Coinbase or something like that. Yeah.
And actually, with Coinbase, you technically don't own a wallet in most cases. Now, Coinbase has two products. They have something called Coinbase, and they have Coinbase Wallet. Coinbase Wallet is what you would call like, it's a wallet that you actually own. Like you have access to the seed phrase. You can actually see all the assets in your wallet. Everything in there is not like some representative cash value of what you own. It is the actual asset.
Okay.
Now, if you go to like what we call a centralized exchange, something like Coinbase or Kraken or something like that, those will usually just give you like the sort of the facade of a wallet. And you don't actually have a wallet. The wallet that you're using is actually something that's owned and managed by them. Although I think they're actually, walking back on that a little bit because there's too much liability involved.
Yeah.
So they try to make that a little bit easier for you. But the problem with using something like this is that I mentioned that there's sort of there's like apps on here that allow you to interface with the different blockchains.
Yeah.
The problem is, like, if let's say I own Bitcoin, but Scott prefers his crypto in like Ethereum or XRP or something like that. There's not really a way to easily say, okay, just take my Bitcoin, swap it to XRP and send it to Scott. Like that's not something that just happens. It's not something that accidentally happens. It's a very intentional thing, and it's not a simple thing, technologically speaking.
So is that something where like something like Coinbase, or you can even purchase crypto on PayPal now? I'm not sure the logistics of that, if it runs similar to Coinbase or not, because I haven't explored that very much. But that's probably where something like Coinbase would be beneficial, to where it kind of manages all of the back end stuff for you. And I think that might be kind of the appeal of something like Coinbase, is it sort of lowers the barrier of entry as far as crypto is concerned, and your average person can like go to Coinbase, they can download the app on their phone, and they can purchase, say, XRP or Bitcoin or, Solana or what have you. And they can watch the value go up and down. They can look at that. It's got the nice chart on there.
Mhm.
And then they can get notifications if there's some big movement or whatever in the market. And if they want to sell it, they can for cash, or if they want to transfer it to another crypto, they can. And it just sort of kind of takes away a lot of the hindrances that might have been there, say, 10 years ago, as far as crypto is concerned. Am I understanding all that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, that's the main reason, right? Like Coinbase is a huge tech company. They have ways to bridge cryptocurrencies. So when you go and you make that transaction, or if I send you money or you send me money, all of that's just going to happen under the hood. Crypto or Coinbase is going to understand that the crypto that you're sending is different than the crypto that that the wallet that they're receiving it into, and they'll try to bridge that. Now that's not always the case. Like there has been times on Coinbase where like I sent from a hardware wallet a crypto to Coinbase and it was not translated successfully. And what ended up happening was I basically sent it into the ether. Like I sent it on this network, but Coinbase hadn't supported that network yet. So it was there on the blockchain at that wallet address, but Coinbase didn't support it yet. So I didn't have that crypto anywhere. It was just sitting there. And then like 6 months later, Coinbase finally decided to support that blockchain, and then boom, all of a sudden it shows up in my Coinbase wallet, which was crazy to me. I thought it was just gone, but it
It's
turns
like
out
Christmas.
the wallet address that was generated for that asset on Coinbase happened to be the same as everything else, which I think is by design.
Mm.
And I finally got it, but like it can be a very finicky thing. Like you sort of mentioned that there's a lot of conveniences with a centralized exchange like Coinbase. You mentioned, we talked about the bridging and stuff like that, but to go along with that, the charts and the way that you can trade. I mean, it's a trading platform, so they have all of those conveniences. Whereas, like, if you're using a regular hardware wallet, like you're not really afforded any of those luxuries. There's ways you can monitor it using external applications, but it's not really real time in many cases, and the fidelity of it all is just not there. Trading with a hardware wallet is not ideal at all, I will say, because at the very least, if you have you can't set stop losses or limit buys or anything like that. You literally have to go in, enter exactly how much you want to buy, and you have to go through all the steps to sign this transaction, which is not quick, by the way. Like it might take you a minute to do all this, whereas if you're using something like Coinbase or Robinhood, it's the click of a button. And if you don't have cash on hand, they usually sort of float it to you, so that you can make the transaction happen now. Now with the blockchain, with a hardware wallet, not only do you have to have the funds on hand, but you have to have like fees and stuff available, the funds to pay the fees for the gas fees and stuff. Because if you don't have that, like you literally can't do anything.
Okay, let's
stuff.
define a term here. So you said gas fees. Do you want to explain that to everybody?
Yeah, so you can just sort of think of gas fees as your trading fees. That's part of the whole like ecosystem that you have to sort of instantiate in order to guarantee that, like, especially like in Bitcoin, like the miners are getting paid their dues, because it's not free to just make things happen on the blockchain. There's compute power at every point. So they have these things called gas fees, and it's usually a result of how the network is built and things like that, and the demand for the network, right? So if you have like a billion people using a network and they just all happen to be using it at the same time, you're going to pay astronomical fees because now the blockchain is overloaded. There's more people requesting transactions to go through than there are validators validating that the transactions are legitimate. So you get put into this waiting line, this mempool area where you're basically just waiting for a block or a miner to pick you up and put you in a block. And if you're not paying the gas fee or the appropriate gas fee, you'll just sit there forever. It's sort of like a bid system.
Sure.
So until you pay more in gas fees, you get moved up in priority, I guess.
Gotcha.
So so I just want to do a quick recap here. So cryptocurrency, it's a digital asset, digital monetary system. Kind of best way for those who are starting to dabble into to think of it this way as stocks, right? You can buy a whole stock or you can buy partial of a stock. Same thing with a cryptocurrency, right? You can buy a whole Bitcoin or you can buy a fragment of a Bitcoin. But either way, you are purchasing a digital cryptocurrency. Am I correct so far?
Yeah, that's completely correct. Thinking of it as a stock is actually a pretty good way to look at it.
And then, okay, all right, let's talk about the blockchain. Now, obviously, when I started diving into cryptocurrency just a few months ago, I was like, what is this blockchain that I keep reading about and hearing about? And the best way it was described to me, and then I'd like you to add your input, because I know you've been throwing the term blockchain out there, and I know for our listeners, they're like, what is this blockchain? Blockchain is the best way to think of it as a bank ledger that records every transaction, right? Now, the thing with this is the really cool thing, and then I would like you to jump in on Brett and explain this a little bit more. Is that with banks, obviously ledgers can be falsified, they can be hacked, right? Whether it's a digital ledger or whatever the case is. But with cryptocurrency, the blockchain, which is the ledger which records all the transaction and so forth, there, all right, in the digital world, is not hackable. Or at least that's what I've been reading about. It is extremely secured, and so because the only way to add a blockchain is by an individual doing something with that crypto, either purchasing it or selling it, right? Or even transferring it. That will be recorded on the blockchain. So could you expound a little bit more exactly on the ledger, the blockchain, as it is referred to in the crypto world?
Sure. And this is working. You can get as technical as you want.
Let's keep it Barney style here.
Yeah. So the blockchain is a little bit different depending on which asset you're looking at, right? So
Okay.
Bitcoin is sort of the main example people try to use because it was the first one. And by today's standards, it's probably one of the more simpler ones.
Mm-hmm.
So the blockchain, as you mentioned, is a ledger. It is very secure. The idea behind them is that it's a trustless banking system. That basically means you're not reliant on anybody to manage your funds for you and trust that they're not going to do anything malicious with it.
Let's pause right there. So for those that just heard what Brett said, very important, because we rely on people to handle and systems to handle our money every day, right? So whether you're going to an ATM or you're using your debit card or your credit card, it's got to go through third parties. Mm-hmm. Right? The operating system that operates the card, the bank that holds the money, right, that your card is tied to, things of that nature right there. If you're going overseas, then you got exchange rates you got to deal with that has to go through third parties, multiple parties, whatever the case is. So realistically, when it comes to you accessing and utilizing your money, it's at the will of the exchanges, right? Of the third parties. Are they operating? Are they up and running? There's been times I've gone to the store to use my card and it's declined. I log in the app and it says we are currently doing something to the system, so you won't have access to your funds for a brief few moments. I'm like, really? Right? But with cryptocurrency, that cuts out all the middlemen. So high advantage to eventually, hopefully one day, like as you elaborated earlier, being able to go to a store and just buy something with cryptocurrency directly. So please continue on the blockchain thing.
Yeah, and that's true. It's a huge upside to be able to just know that all of your stuff is going to get validated. You're going to have everybody on the blockchain validate your transaction. It's going to get pushed through, and you don't have to worry about someone in the middle, a banker, someone skimming something on top, or there's an infrastructure issue that's going on. It's preventing you from spending your money as you'd like, or something like that. That was one of the main things that was one of the main ideas behind why the original Bitcoin blockchain was made. By Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, there's been a lot of discussion as to how those blockchains are designed and how they're built moving forward. you'll read things into like big block size versus small block size, which really doesn't matter for the points of this discussion. But there's different ways that the actual blockchain could be built that could improve security or make it a little bit worse, and a lot of that has to do with control over the validators. And when you're talking about Bitcoin, those validators are synonymous with your miners, your Bitcoin miners. And essentially what happens is you have all of these miners and the blockchain. They interact with the blockchain, but they are sort of external to it, if that makes sense. They're basically little compute devices that all they do 24/7 is listen for new transactions that are being put or requested to be put on the blockchain. And the incentive for people to run these miners is of course, the revenue from the actual Bitcoin that you get for being a miner, right? So traditionally what happens is you have a miner and it's going to try and solve this complex puzzle. You can, if you really care about all the details about exactly what it's doing, you can go and you can look it up. But essentially, it's running a hashing algorithm, and it's basically a guess and check game where they're just guessing and checking if whatever the hash value that they're getting matches what it needs to match.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they find that, they are the winner, and that means that they are afforded the opportunity to bundle up some transactions and put it on the blockchain. And when they do that, someone's transaction just finally went through. They get paid some Bitcoin, depending on what the how it's configured, right? And then the transaction is complete, and then it continues to do the same thing over and over again. Now, back in the early days of Bitcoin, you didn't need that much compute power because the complexity of the blockchain, the difficulty level wasn't very high. So it was a lot easier to solve those problems. Now, it's a lot harder. There's a lot more people using it. The difficulty level went up. It takes a lot longer to complete these puzzles. And if you only have, say, one miner, if you just have one miner who's competing by himself to try and get these transactions, he's almost never going to win. Statistically, the odds are stacked against him because you have like mega factories in China and in Texas and things like that just have entire warehouses full of Bitcoin miners.
Yeah.
And if you have 50 million Bitcoin miners working against your one to try and put transactions on the blockchain, you're never going to win that competition.
Mm-hmm.
So what people decided was, let's put all of these miners into a mining pool, and we'll all pull our compute resources together, and we'll split the reward. So you might join a mining pool with like 500 other people, and you've all got your miners chugging along. If you contributed, say, 10% of the compute power to that farm, you might get 10% of the reward once your pool finds a block. So that's the financial incentive behind Bitcoin, and that's what's called a consensus mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Each blockchain sort of has its own consensus mechanism that's used to say, hey, this transaction is legitimate. I've found the answer to this problem. Everybody else check me on this, and then they all agree, and then you ship off the block to the blockchain. Now, there's lots of other types of consensus mechanisms that other blockchains implement. You can pretty much go to any of the blockchains and just look up and see how they do it. It's usually fairly complicated. One of Bitcoin's biggest problems was the economical impact, especially when it comes to like the use of energy, because that complex problem is arbitrary, right? There's nothing that is crucial about that particular puzzle being solved. Like, the only reason it's there is to make it difficult for the miners so they can compete amongst each other for the opportunity to make the block. It's nothing more than just an arbitrary game.
Yeah.
Now then you have things like Ethereum, which moved from a proof of work algorithm, which is what Bitcoin calls it when you're competing against each other with the hash power, to a proof of stake. And that pretty much did away with the idea that you have to have a miner that's just doing all of these 24/7 hashes to try and put things on the blockchain. Proof of stake works more so based on how much of that coin that you own. So if you're in the Ethereum ecosystem and you want to be an Ethereum validator, the chances that you get you're afforded the opportunity to put Ethereum blocks on the Ethereum blockchain is increased, and you make more revenue by simply owning more Ethereum. So you might see things like, hey, you can stake your coin here or whatever. What that's basically saying is, give us your Ethereum to hold for you, and we'll stake it, and then we'll give you the revenue that comes back from it. So you're not really a validator at that point, but the people holding the coin for you are acting as one. So that's the difference between proof of stake and proof of work. Proof of stake doesn't implement all of the weird like hashing requirements. Ethereum used to do it like that.
I see that Solana affords staking, so does Cardano affords staking as well. Okay, so we have cryptocurrency, which is a digital asset. You have the blockchain, which is the ledger, right? That shows the transaction. It is a secure transaction that is recorded digitally, right, on a blockchain, the ledger, for those that want to simplify it a little bit more. You have miners or validators, right, that are, essentially third parties or external, right, and they can basically overwatch the blockchain. They can be rewarded by solving the block and so forth there, but you don't necessarily have to be a miner or a validator in order to start dabbling into crypto, correct?
That is absolutely correct. It would be, It's always encouraged, of course, because it increases sort of the security and integrity of the blockchain.
Okay.
That's not something I've talked about yet, but we can talk about that here in a minute if you'd like.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about that, and then we'll circle back around to a couple other things I want to mention. But yeah, go ahead and talk about that.
Sure. So one of the biggest concerns with blockchain tech is that it does have the potential to be hacked. Not in an easy way, but I sort of mentioned that there's this concept of a consensus mechanism where it's basically majority rules. If the majority of the validators on the network say, this guy's transactions are legitimate, go ahead and add them to the blockchain. It is possible that doesn't happen, right? And ownership of the validators is an extremely important topic, primarily because you have countries like China who are heavily invested in these miners, and not only because it can be quite lucrative, but also because the control over the total number of miners is important. So there's an attack that I believe is called the 51% attack, and it basically just says if the majority of miners agree that a transaction is valid, it's valid. If a country like China owns 51% of the miners, they could literally rewrite the blockchain.
Interesting.
So they could say, hey, that legitimate transaction is not valid, or if one of their validators presents to the blockchain, hey, here is my version of this block, and it's duplicating or falsifying values in the to and from sending sections, they could give themselves an insane amount of wealth.
Okay, so that makes it interesting why I guess the Trump administration has started being very pro-friendly and started a cryptocurrency task force, I guess if you would call it.
I think when Trump says something to the effect of he wants the United States to be the cryptocurrency capital of the world, that comment doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to a lot of people. And I'll admit it didn't necessarily make a ton of sense to me in the beginning
with
either.
Brett clarifying this, now that makes much more sense. And I'm like, that's an aha moment right there.
That could be a reason for it, yeah.
So most likely, or I guess a likely explanation to that comment is that, Donald Trump is wanting to significantly ramp up the rate in which the United States mines, or, for lack of a better phrase,
cryptocurrency, uses cryptocurrency.
Right. Yeah, purchases crypto, uses crypto, that kind of thing. So
potentially,
right.
It's very hard to achieve an attack like that. Like I kind of just mentioned it as a possibility. Statistically, it's not really a possibility, just because the sheer amount of compute power to own 51% of the blockchain is astronomical.
Right.
Like it is several times larger, probably in the electricity costs than several countries' GDP.
Right.
Like it's absolutely unsustainable and could actually become unprofitable depending on how they attack it.
Right. Right. And not to say that that's President Trump's end goal with that, but maybe more so just to sort of, if the United States is the cryptocurrency capital of the world, it probably hedges risk against potential adversaries such as China to do the same thing. So
for sure.
All right. Let's look at some of these because if for those of our listeners that are like, okay, hey, now I want to start diving into cryptocurrency and stuff, but there are some things that I came across that I had to, ask Google on what is this. So if you can provide some clarification here or correct me. So for example, altcoins. All right, that term I frequently seen used. Now, as I understand it, an altcoin is a cryptocurrency other than Bitcoin. It includes every other cryptocurrency besides Bitcoin. Is that correct?
I don't. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not sure I know the official term. In my experience, I don't know that I would have categorized it as something other than Bitcoin. I would have labeled it as something that is, separate from the native coin of that blockchain. So, for example, and an altcoin can be a meme coin at the same time, right? So, if you have, say, you're on the Ethereum blockchain, and the Ethereum blockchain is more than just really a blockchain. It's an ecosystem. It's a way for web developers or Web3 developers to build apps that work with the blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, it allows the developers to create any random coin that they want. So you have Ethereum, which powers the Ethereum blockchain. So everything, like all the gas fees and things like that, are paid for in Ethereum. If you want to stand up a new coin, you have to pay the gas fees to do so, and that's always paid in Ethereum. So the native currency of the coin or of that blockchain is Ethereum.
Mm-hmm.
But the blockchain supports additional coins that follow a specific standard. I don't actually remember the name of the standard. It's like, what's it called? I'll tell you in a second. But there's different standards that define how coins are supposed to work and how NFTs are supposed to work. And any coin that is not Ethereum that exists on the Ethereum blockchain would be like an altcoin. It's an alternative to Ethereum.
So, for example, I know Solana, right? That is its own entity right there. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Trump meme coin, it is a meme coin. And I'd like to clarify exactly what a meme coin is here in a second. But that is on the Solana blockchain. So therefore, the Trump coin, which is a meme coin, is classified as a altcoin on the Solana blockchain. All right.
Right. And I could be wrong on that. Like maybe it is referring to just coins other than Bitcoin. I feel like I've heard it used in other contexts, and maybe it could just be the definition is changing as we move along, right?
It could be.
Bitcoin sort of was the top dog, and really still is. But if I'm being honest, Bitcoin is the least useful. I shouldn't say the least useful. It is one of the least useful coins available to cryptocurrency.
Which is interesting, I found that intriguing because I've seen that too. It's like Bitcoin, it is the measure marker for the crypto world, but by far and large, there are other coins much more useful and maybe even more profitable to use. All right, so altcoins, there's debate on that. Stable coins, what exactly is a stable coin?
Stablecoin is a coin that exists on a blockchain. It could be any of them, and actually there's quite a lot of them, but they're basically pegged to some stable value. So typically you'll have, like for us, like we'll care a lot about the USD stablecoin, and there are several versions of it that are backed by different things.
But for those that are not too sure what you just mentioned, the USD coin is the US dollar. Mm-hmm. Okay, yep. But represented in the coin on the crypto market or universe.
Sure.
Go ahead.
And then there's like every country that cares about, Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies will typically have their own stable coin, right? Because it's pretty much essential to have if you don't have, if you want to onboard things to the blockchain, right? Because you don't just have money available to you on the blockchain, right? Like you have to import money from US dollars in some way, right? Because you don't just have like Bitcoin in your bank, right? So you can't send Bitcoin to your wallet if you don't have Bitcoin. So what you have to do is you have to what they call ramp, and you don't have to do this, by the way, if you're using like a centralized exchange like Coinbase or something like that. They do all that for you. But if you're using if you're using the blockchain raw, right? Like if you're doing it all on your own, all the nitty gritty details are up to you to figure out. You would have to use some third party provider to on ramp coins or on ramp US dollars. And when you do that, they usually deposit USD coin, or there's Tether coin, or there are other versions too. Like Tether and USDC are the two main ones for US. But then you would be able to then swap that out to any other cryptocurrency you want. And it's nice if you're trading, because then you can, like, say you're trading Ethereum, but you don't want to keep it in Ethereum in your wallet, right? You want some stability there. You then just swap it to USD, and then it'll stay pegged to the US dollar for as long as you own it.
Okay.
With a little asterisk there.
So last one, and then I want to start moving on the direction the crypto market is going and why people should be paying attention. But meme coin, best way I've seen this is it's a joke coin like Dogecoin. It's yes, it does have some intrinsic monetary value to it, but it is as a meme that is created on the internet to be funny. It is also a meme coin in the crypto world. But anything else you can add to that?
Yeah, I would generally say stay away from them. There was a time when, before I was really into, crypto at all, Robinhood actually offered Dogecoin as an investable asset. And if you've ever used Robinhood before, you'll know that whenever you spend money and you invest it and you have a little bit left over, it's just sitting there doing nothing. So I didn't really like that. I didn't like just having money sitting there. So Dogecoin was super, super cheap. So I would just throw all my fractions of my pennies into Dogecoin. And then eventually one day it just popped off. Like this was a long time ago. It just popped off, and I made like, $800 overnight just because I had a whole bunch of stuff just sitting there. I don't know how it happened. It just did. But it's meme coins usually don't have a purpose, right? Like I said, Bitcoin is one of the least useful coins out there. And that's because from a utility perspective, it doesn't offer much, right? Like if you go and you look at Ethereum, there are ways for developers to create, Web3 enabled apps. When I say Web3, I'm just talking about like a new version of the web and how it's used, right? So normally if you have like a website, it might be running some JavaScript or something like that in the back end. But with crypto, there's a way you can build apps into your website that interact with the blockchain, and that's what we call Web3. That uses a programming language called Solidity, which is very similar to JavaScript, and that's how that programming language is what allows you to talk to the Ethereum blockchain. So Ethereum offers a programming language for developers to use. It offers a way to mint new coins. It offers a way to stand up projects, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas like Bitcoin, it has the idea of smart contracts to some extent. And when I say smart contracts, I'm referring to those apps sort of that you can build into your website or really anywhere. Bitcoin has like some semblance of that, but it's not as refined as what you would get from like Ethereum. So there's a lot of utility involved too. And if you're looking at other coins like XRP or like Cardano or something like that, usually they all have some technology behind them, whether it's on the chain or off the chain, that make it a worthwhile investment, right? Like with Bitcoin, you invest in Bitcoin because you think it's going to go up. And there's not really anything that's backing it other than just like it was the first one and it's the main one people recognize. If you go in and you invest something into like XRP, which is only like $2.30 or something like that right now, like you're really investing in that more so as like a stock. Like you think that the Ripple company is going to do really well because they plan to overhaul how the SWIFT or international banking system is done. So from that perspective, it's like, okay, XRP offers a lot of utility for international transactions, and I think that's a really good idea. I'm going to invest in this sort of from the perspective or the mentality that it's like a stock and then it's going to go up because it provides value. It has it has the opportunity or the potential to go much higher. Whereas like in Bitcoin, I mean, I guess you're still looking at it from like a stock perspective, but there's not really anything that's driving it other than just like what people want to buy.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of answered the question. I was like, well, essentially, what determines the value of crypto? Obviously, if you're looking at investing in crypto, just like if you're doing with stocks, you're looking at, okay, what is that company doing? What is their purpose? What are they trying to achieve, right? And obviously with XRP, as you allude to, which I'm a huge XRP supporter, and I see the SWIFT, which is the monetary system that processes global transactions. I think it's like I forgot what the numbers, like 500 maybe $1 trillion, something like that. I don't know. It's an astronomical number, but the system that processes these transactions from country to country and so forth here it's old. It's been around forever, right? It costs a ton of money to operate, plus the fees that are associated with it, right? If you're going to send $1 billion over to somewhere, right, it's not going to be $1 billion by the time it gets to its destination,
If
right?
it even
So you're
gets
going to
there.
have to. What's that?
I said if it even gets there, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
even if it gets there,
errors
because it can get
involved in this process.
held up, right? Where XRP removes that, you could send $1 billion and it's a small fraction of the percentage costs of the fees to process this stuff. And it can process, I think, like 1,500 some transactions a second.
Yep.
Right. So there is huge, and XRP, as I'm aware of, is really the leader in the forefront of this movement. And banks are now hopping on board and adopting XRP's ledger. Which makes extremely, I think, a potential to be extremely valuable in the near future. So obviously, the value of crypto is determined by its usefulness. Is that a best way, in simplistic terms, to put it? The more useful it is, the more people that are jumping on board to use it, which can thus increase the value of that cryptocurrency. Is that right?
Yep. No, I would agree. I would not say that's like guaranteed, right? Because there could be something that's incredibly useful that just nobody knows about, nobody buys, so then it never goes up in price. Or you have things that are only mildly useful, like Bitcoin, and the only reason it's worth what it is because it's the thing people recognize the most. It was the first one, so that's what people invest in.
It's sort of the name brand as far as crypto is concerned.
Yeah. So I'd really like to now devote the last part of our session here to really the future of cryptocurrency, which you're seeing, what's being reported on, and put that. But I put in our notes here, and I thought it was interesting. With what's his name? Oh, Kevin O'Leary. Who says that the crypto market, due to the Trump administration, is now the 12th sector of the investing community, and that the cowboy era, which is really referring to the early 2000s and those that did things illegally. We've seen some of these guys on the news. They did things illegally with crypto and so forth, and they've been arrested. But the cowboy era of crypto is over, and at the 12th sector of investing is really now opening up. So what does the future, we all know that the United States is on track, or is at least trying to become the crypto capital of the world. The SEC, right, they've just sworn in Paul Atkins, who's a very pro-friendly crypto guy, right, who's leading this crypto drive. So what does all this mean to the average Joe like myself, who's newly starting to get into crypto, who wants to start getting more involved in the crypto? Why should people be paying attention to all this that's going on in the crypto world right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess I'll start off by saying I think it's going to get a lot bigger. That's certainly the trend. I think you have to be extremely careful about what it is you decide to buy into, because sort of as I alluded to earlier, it's not hard for anybody to just go in and just create a coin, right?
Yeah.
And it's very easy to structure a coin such that it looks like something that it's not. And it's not hard to get it listed in certain places either. So as you get into crypto and buying it, I sort of see crypto as being the next thing. Like it's like our generation's telemarketer scam, if that makes sense, right? Like you might have people calling your grandparents over the phone, or creating social engineered phishing links or something like that online. And it's very easy for them to click on that, not understanding how it all works under the hood. And all of a sudden they're out thousands of dollars because they didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Crypto is complicated enough and it's new enough for this generation that I think if you're not careful, you can end up exactly like that, because there's not a lot of regulation around it. There's not a lot of awareness about the current scams and schemes that go on with trying to take money out of people's accounts. There's some very crafty, very interesting scams out there that try to take all your coins from you. And this is slightly off topic, but even the other day, like me and my grandpa were both part of the BlockFi, which is a trading platform that no longer exists. BlockFi bankruptcy filings, and we both had some amount of money that was on that platform, and they filed for bankruptcy, right? So as part of those filings, they were going to give us our money back, right? So we were getting emails, and we were getting like, hey, verify this is the amount that you're owed, go into your BlockFi account, blah, 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 go through all these steps. And eventually we got, a check in the mail from like the firm that was representing them, and we got our money back. But just earlier last week, or even last week, it was end of last week, we got an email from a very convincing source. It was the group that was representing BlockFi, and they're like, hey, you have like $4,163 outstanding. You need to withdraw that. There was like a withdrawal button there. And they wanted you to connect your hardware wallet, and they wanted you to enter your seed phrase and all this other stuff to get your money. If you don't know any better, you're immediately going to do that, and boom, all your assets are gone.
Yeah.
And it was extremely convincing. So I guess I'll say, first off, just be very careful if you decide to get into this, what you're doing with it. If you're not sure what you're doing, I would highly recommend sticking to a centralized platform like Coinbase or Robinhood or Kraken or Webull or something like that.
I think PayPal now is doing it, as Scott alluded to earlier.
There's just a lot of risk that comes with blockchain transactions. But if you're experienced, there's a lot less risk, right? If you know what you're doing, you're not at the mercy of the centralized exchanges. You're not at the mercy of like somebody handling your money for you, because if you're using a centralized exchange like Coinbase, quite frankly, you're circumventing all of the good things about blockchain, right? Because at that point, the blockchain is protecting Coinbase. It's not protecting you, right? There's still people at Coinbase that could do something with your money. There's still, you've not really done anything other than just like create cryptocurrency with like a fiat interface, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So basically, using Coinbase it kind of makes cryptocurrency, that analogy to investment, a little bit more like real. You're essentially just investing into the cryptocurrency as opposed to actually purchasing and managing the asset yourself.
Yeah.
And sort of kind of bypassing the, like you said, the benefits of, or some of the benefits of cryptocurrency, which would be the security and the privacy and that kind of thing.
Right. And if you guys really want to get into it, like if you want to go into the blockchain and you want to mess around with like fake funds, there is a way you can do that. There's something called a test net, and you can give yourself like 2 million Ethereum, whatever you want to do. I mean, it's all pointless, right? Because it's just test stuff. But you could take it and, you could go on the test net, and you could give yourself 2 million Ethereum, and then, Brandon could go on the test net and he'd give himself 2 million Ethereum, and you guys could just swap Ethereum back and forth all day just to get a feel for how it works if you wanted to. But as far as where I think, all this is going, I think it's cool. I think it's good. I think there's a lot to be cautious about, just because there isn't a lot of regulation yet, and it is very easy to get scammed. And then you have other possibilities too, and I mentioned this to Scott a little bit earlier. The idea of like a central bank digital currency system, and that is if this progresses far enough to the point where the U.S. is just like, yeah, we're not using the U.S. dollar for anything really anymore. We're just going to go to like 100% crypto. We have our, USDC stablecoin. This is going to be like the staple. This is going to be the baseline for all of our transactions. Then all of a sudden, you have the government. They control their own blockchain, potentially, and they can see your wallet, and they can choose or determine how it is that you spend those assets. which is a major concern because I think there's been things happening in China that are similar to this, right? Where if you have like a central bank digital currency and it's completely regulated by the government, and despite the fact that it's crypto, there really isn't any anonymity at all. Like as long as I know what your wallet address is, I can see everything you do on the blockchain, and it's very easy to follow. Well, it's easy to follow once you've done it a time or two. It can be a little bit overwhelming the first time you look at a blockchain explorer, but it's very easy to see what people are doing.
All the transactions are public.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. There's nothing anonymous about how you interact with the blockchain. Now there's things that you can do, like you can send your cash to like some intermediate like app that will then wash the money for you and send it somewhere else. So you could have like an anonymous wallet somewhere that basically holds all of your washed money if you wanted to. But your original wallet, this is why you can't hide from the IRS, right? Like if the IRS knows what your crypto wallet is or what your Coinbase wallet is, they know where the money was on ramped. Especially if you're doing your crypto taxes, if you've done your crypto taxes, like they can see what your wallet address is, where it came from, where you've been sending it, and all of that. And once they have that, they can see everything you've been doing, and they could tell you if you're right or wrong on your taxes, whatever. But there is a lot of control that can come with like a CBDC.
Yeah, I could totally see the control aspect of it and how that would be problematic. And I do think the government tends to they kind of tend to lean towards, if they're going to control something or not control something, they're probably going to choose to control it. So it doesn't surprise me to see the United States getting involved in the digital currency space, with obviously with their own stable coin and things like that, backed by the U.S. dollar. And I do think it's totally feasible and realistic in the future that, maybe not even the near future, but, say 20 years from now, that, or 30, 40 years from now, that the United States moves away from its fiat currency and completely adopts a digital type currency. So, and how all of the transactions and everything are public, and everything is able to be seen. The government could find everything and see exactly what you have. That just sounds, if I were a government entity, that would sound very appealing.
I know I've compared it to this before with you, Scott, but I've been comparing the crypto craze right now, essentially similar to the 1849 gold rush in California. Right, in 1849, gold was obviously found in California. What did everybody do? They flocked to California in hopes of striking it rich. And in order to strike it rich, what was required? They had to obviously get all the equipment and the tools necessary to do the dig, right? And then you had to find that vein, right? Once you found the vein, you were good, but it was dangerous, right? You could have risked, collapse of a cave, your infrastructure and things of that nature, right? But if you knew what you were doing and you were doing it right, right, and you found that vein, you would strike it rich. And I think the same can almost be said of crypto. You need to be smart about it. You need to do it right. You need to do your research, right? But you could strike that gold vein. Now let's look at some of these cryptos. Obviously, Bitcoin is the number one. Everyone's very familiar with Bitcoin. It's there. It is essentially name brand. That's what it's there, and so it's going to be around. But there are other cryptos that are certainly worth looking into, and I'm kind of curious. Obviously Ethereum and Solana are pretty big in value in and of themselves for just one coin, right? XRP, we've mentioned XRP and the potential value there. What about some others? Any others that are worse? I am kind of curious in Cardano and HBAR, which are other two cryptocurrencies. They're only they're under $1 in price currently. I think HBAR is at 19 cents a coin, where Cardano is like 70 cents a coin right now. So I'm just kind of curious your take on which cryptos are, again, this is not investment advice to anybody out there listening. We are just speculating. It's 100%,
Yeah, I think that's
speculation here.
Yeah, and I think before we dive into that, just really quick, I think that is an important distinction to make. I would even make the argument that purchasing crypto is not an investment so much as it is a speculation.
Yes.
Just because we don't necessarily have the history and the trend lines behind crypto, with the exception of Bitcoin, which even that can be unrealistic in my opinion. And so, yeah, just to put that out there, we're not telling anybody what to do with their money. All of that is your own decision. If you purchase crypto, I would consider it more speculation in what crypto could be valued, more so than an investment in the value of a product like you would in the stock market.
Yeah. This is just us having conversation with what we already know in crypto, coming to a guy, Brett, who knows more about crypto, and so we're just kind of curious. So, yeah, what's your 2 cents on if we looking at investing? I'm curious on your thoughts on HBAR, so forth. If you're up to speed on that, or Cardano as well. But yeah, I just want to hear your thoughts on those.
I've actually been out of the crypto market. Well, I say out of the crypto market. I've not been following it as closely as I have in the past. So I'm not super familiar with HBAR, but I mean, my favorites. There's not a lot of crypto that I actually like, because a lot of it for me is too speculative. I'm sort of more of a tech enthusiast, so I like to look at how it all works and the technology behind each of the blockchains and whatnot. But there are some coins I think that stand out from some of the others. I think Bitcoin is always a pretty solid investment. Of course, you have the cyclical ups and downs with Bitcoins that are usually pretty easily tracked. Yeah. I think if you go Bitcoin, like it's almost too big to fail. But that's not to say you won't lose money. I'm just saying like it'll go up, it'll go down, but I think
it'll probably never be valued at zero though.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so, but it's really hard to say. Like it's crypto, it's still unregulated. There's a lot that can happen, that sort of thing. Of course, XRP is my current favorite, and that's because I think it has the biggest ceiling. I guess that's one way of saying it. I think right now it's pretty undervalued. Not in like a technical sense, but I think at some point it's going to be. I think it's going to be a lot more valuable, especially like if it does what it says it's going to do, and you can pretty much entirely replace SWIFT as the global standard for international transactions. This thing could go crazy.
It could. No, I want to clarify because we forgot to mention this. But when it comes to cryptocurrencies, whether it's XRP, Bitcoin, there's only a limited amount of these coins. So it's not like a fiat currency, which the government can just keep printing money, which can cause the valuation of the dollar to go up and down and so forth here. Right? With cryptocurrencies, for our listeners, there is only a limited amount. It is limited. It will not go beyond that, and it will not drop below that. That is what's printed in the crypto universe, and so only that much money will stay there, which thus can have an impact on its valuation. All right, but yeah, continue.
Yep. Bitcoin, I think, is probably the most scarce at the moment. Like a lot of the newer coins coming out, they'll print like billions of tokens.
Yeah.
So, and they still maintain value. It's just that their value isn't backed by its scarcity, right? It's backed more so by its utility, which is why Bitcoin is fairly stable in its investment perspective. But something tangential to XRP though is also XLM, which if you've looked into XRP at all, you've probably seen some things about XLM.
Yeah, I've seen those things.
It's very similar. It's actually founded by the Ripple co-founder, which Ripple is XRP. So they do a lot of things similar, but I think XRP is probably the way that most people are going to go. Actually, XRP really didn't start to break out until like this SEC lawsuit started to wrap up, which is a whole nother discussion. But Cardano's good. I like Cardano. That was one that I was actually planning on and investing in a node at one point. I like Cardano. Ethereum's always solid. Now, something we didn't talk about too much was that Ethereum, while it offers a lot of utility, is not very good at doing like normal blockchain stuff, right? Like if you want to send me, or if I want to send you Ethereum, that is not something that is cheap to do. Like
Yeah.
the gas fees for Ethereum are absolutely unreal. Now, if you can catch it on a good day or a down day, and it's not like too terrible, but generally speaking, it's very expensive to send things over the Ethereum network. So you'll see things like Solana, which were sort of Ethereum competitors. It's its own blockchain, that type of thing. But the transactions that it can handle are much, like the throughput is much higher. So the transactions are cheaper and they're faster, which is why a lot of people like Cardano better. But with that, usually there's sort of a trade-off with speed, and the speed is like security. That's not to say that Solana is insecure, but it the way that it's built has traits similar to things that like Bitcoin purists hate about, big blocks versus small blocks and the security implications that come with that. But with Ethereum, to sort of address some of the speed and throughput issues, they came out with something called like a layer 3 blockchain, which is basically like it's its own blockchain, but it's directly compatible with Ethereum. It sort of sits on top of Ethereum, and you can do all of your transactions in something like what's it called? Polygon. The name for that is Matic, MATIC, and it's a layer 3 blockchain that allows you to do transactions much faster and much more quickly, and a lot cheaper than you would do on Ethereum, and then you can just move it straight back over to the Ethereum blockchain. Or you could just keep it on Polygon until you want to move it over. But there's things called layer 3 blockchain. So you'll see things like Matic, AVAX is another one that I like. Avalanche Network, it's its own blockchain.
I've seen that one. Yeah.
It's
like
really good
$20 a share or coin now.
Yeah, I think it's been traditionally higher than that, I think. But
let me see. I was just on it. I was just looking at AVAX. $22 is AVAX currently right now.
Right. Shoot, I didn't even look at like what all the different options are these days.
There's so many.
Very careful again about which ones you pick. But
I'm curious on your take, so definitely want to hear more of your take on HBAR. I'm seeing a lot on that. So not obviously on here because we're about to wrap up here, but if you could text our private chat. We should make a subscription. People can have access to our chats on these, latest news.
I'm down for it. We just need more people to listen.
Yeah. $9.99 to talk to Brett and get sound financial advice on cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on it.
But I'm curious though. HBAR, I'm looking at, and so I want to get your take on that. So, when you get time, text us on that. But okay, quite fascinating.
There was also some really cool ones that allowed you to use the blockchain as a file storage system. So you could have tokens and things like that on this blockchain, but you could also like upload all of your like files and things to the blockchain, and they're sort of like split into fragments, and they're like, I don't know, it's like a torrent or file sharing where you have like fragmented pieces of data on the blockchain. It's pretty cool.
Interesting.
All right.
So quite fascinating.
Yeah, and I do think there is a tendency amongst the laymen, people like me and Brandon, to look at. I think the reason why crypto is becoming so popular is everyone saw what happened with Bitcoin, and now people are kind of becoming aware as to how much a Bitcoin is actually worth. I think right now it's just under $95,000 per coin.
I mean, look, I'm on there right now. It's 95,000 right now.
Okay, so people look at what happened with Bitcoin, and they're like, "Oh my gosh,
I was stupid.
This is my moment.
Purchase it back in the early 2000s.
Why didn't I buy 10 Bitcoin back in the early 2000s and be set for life, right? Or maybe not for life, but be pretty comfortable." So I do think there's a tendency to look at crypto through the lens of Bitcoin maybe like coins like XRP, for example. There's great potential for XRP to have massive value. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to hop on this and I'm going to buy XRP. I'm going to hold it. I'm never going to let it go until it reaches like, $100,000 in value, like Bitcoin. It'll do just what Bitcoin did. And I think Bitcoin is artificially driving a lot of the interest and maybe even value into cryptocurrency in general, because people are looking for the next Bitcoin. They're looking for the next thing that's going to shoot up, 25% in value in one day, which I think is the highest single day increase in cryptocurrency value. And I mean, is that kind of your impression from, because Brett, you've been involved or at least around crypto for a long time. I mean, me and you've talked about it off and on for years. Is that sort of your impression with the whole current movement towards cryptocurrency, as people are looking for the next Bitcoin to kind of get rich quick?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, nobody's doing anything like, putting in all the effort to try and learn all this stuff. If there wasn't some sort of like upside, usually.
Yeah.
And usually monetary upside is a pretty good reason to get into some of the stuff. So, I'd say, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's like some people that are just interested in how it all works and things like that. But,
sure.
For the most part, yeah, I'd say the monetary perspective is probably a pretty good guess.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage our listeners that, if you're going to start investing into crypto, just like you invest in the stock market, you got to have a plan, a short-term plan, a long-term plan. And it's really a game of patience, right? So if you have a short-term plan, okay, at this point, this is when I'm going to sell my crypto and make a profit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Others, though, are more like, you're in it for the long haul. You're in there for 10 to 15 years, and it's going to go up to some point, but you're just not going to touch it, right? So it's not a quick get rich quick scheme. Definitely not. It's a patience game, but paying attention, learning the stuff as Brett has taught us this morning on crypto, and just being smart, just like you would with your stocks. Which stocks to invest in, being smart with your assets. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, either of you gentlemen have anything to add before we cut the episode off for today?
I want to have Brett back. I want to really discuss kind of the future of crypto next time. We got to have you back, Brent.
Sure. Yeah, I'm down for it.
No.
Brett, anything to say in closing before we leave the fine people of the internet?
I guess the only thing I'll say is just sort of, I don't know, like tame your expectations a little bit. Like you might get in, and especially right now in today's economy, it's probably going to go down quite a bit. It might come back up. I mean, I know I got my dad into XRP. I got my uncle in XRP. It goes down.
It goes down. $1.70, I think.
I got into it when it was around 40 cents, so it was a little bit.
Oh,
it's not as big. Big deal for me so much. I mean, I bought more when it got up to like $2 or so, but once it dips below what you initially put in, the first thing most people want to do is like panic a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's been fluctuating between $2 and I'd say $2.30 or so for the past.
Yeah, I'd say $2.30.
So I think its peak was like $3.13 or something back in January of this year.
84 cents.
Yeah. Also, don't try to time it. Like, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. Like, as soon as you sell, it's going to go up. As soon as you buy, it's going to go down. Like, it's just the way it works.
Yep. I think that's wisdom. Yeah.
If you want to learn more about the actual tech behind it, like I said, you can mess around the testnet. If you want to mess around the hardware wallet, this is like a cheaper version of the one that I just showed you. This is like a $50 one. It doesn't have Bluetooth or anything like that. You just plug it into your computer and you can start messing around with it. If you're looking for like a way to learn about how some of the stuff works, like Bitcoin is a good example. It's the oldest example. It's the simplest example in my opinion. But yeah,
very cool. Well, next time we have Brett on, we'll talk about how cryptocurrency is going to be the one world currency at the end of the world. So
I mean, nothing's off the table,
right? Seems the most realistic. Oh man. Well, on that note, we'll go ahead and we'll cut it off for today. We certainly appreciate everybody watching and listening. If you're out there on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like button. Leave a comment on the video. We'd certainly like to hear what you think about cryptocurrency, and let us know. We try to engage with you guys down in the comments and try to actively entertain some interesting conversation. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you're listening on a podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anything like that. Go ahead and follow the show, leave a 5-star review, tell everybody why you like the show. It helps us out greatly, helps us out with all of the algorithms and such. So we'd certainly appreciate all of the help, and tune in next week. We actually have another guest. So we went from having no guests for the last 30 episodes to now we have 2 in 2 weeks. So obviously enjoyed the episode with Brett today. Next week, we are going to hop back on the theological train, and we're going to talk about deliverance ministry, casting out demons, Christians' authority over the demonic, and we're going to be discussing that with Michael Miller from the Remnant Radio podcast. So that will be an exciting episode. We're very excited about that one. So tune in next week if you're more into the theological topics. And on that note, we'll go ahead and duck out for today. We'll see you all next week.